I have my buddy Simon Cheng back to see me for the first time in about 5 years. So it's amazing to have him back on the podcast. And Simon's really into Taoism and many other spiritual practices. So we're going to talk about life, kids, spiritual practices, our own ways of evolving, and probably about some of his amazing teas and products. Simon's Pique teas are my favorite. They're amazing, and everybody I've ever turned them on to loves them. So Simon, welcome back. It's great to see you. Your first trip to the Rainbow House.
So good to be here, Paul. I'm so happy. I feel so amazing.
Thank you.
It's so joyful to be able to see you and be here again.
And have a smoke.
And have a smoke.
Simon's he likes to share the bag with me, so he's a cool cat.
It's the best shit ever. I mean, this is a treat. This is a huge gift. It's probably very healing and medicinal.
It is.
Absolutely feel it.
And you gave me your new, I think it's a fairly new cacao blend. That was very powerful. What was that?
So it's called Nandika. It's named after the sword of light of Vishnu. The idea is to help people that don't want coffee or want a second cup of coffee but don't feel like it. Experience a different form of energy, of fuel. Mm-hmm. It's got a cacao from the Peruvian Andes. It's been used in ceremony before the Incans till today. Mm-hmm. That's how important this strain of cacao is. There's a 30% cacao butter content in the powder. It's unprecedented in anything on the market.
You can actually see the oil floating on the top of the cup when you pour the hot water, and I love that.
That's right.
I'm a fat lover.
And, as you know, that the fat is an amazing delivery platform and mechanism for adaptogenic mushrooms.
Right.
And so we have reishi, lion's mane, chaga, cordyceps in there, only fruiting body, water extracted, both. Our reishi actually has reishi spore powder as well, which we've actually broken the cell wall of through ultrasound. And then the teas that are in there are two best. They're from 250-year-old tea trees. They grow wild in a mountain next to the Himalayas. I've been 4 times to the farm. And you have to machete your way in just to pluck the leaves. So all that vegetation is dying, decomposing, enriching the soil.
Right.
There's no competition for nutrient source, unlike in industrial farms where they kill everything with herbicides.
Yes.
This stuff's allowed to grow, and it creates this incredible biology, very diverse of organisms in the soil. And the teas are fermenting. And so the things that are causing fermentation are the microbes from that forest.
Right.
So an insanely virtuous process. And when you drink the fermented teas, you get the metabolites, you get the microbes, and then you get, obviously the initial catechins and polyphenols that are in the tea to begin with. So
all your teas are like just a cut above, they're so clean and so flavorful.
Thank you.
Just really good stuff. I've always loved turning my friends on to your teas too, because I always have I'm always waiting for the first sip so I can see the reaction and the flavors and the smells. It's just something special. That cacao is quite powerful. I had my espresso this morning, and so I said to Simon right away, wow, this would be a great replacement for people that want to get off of coffee. And I noticed right away, when you drink espresso or coffee, it has quite a drying effect on your body.
Right.
But I noticed that the would you call it a tea? Is it classified as a tea?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the caffeine source in Nandika is are 2 teas. So it's actually the green and the fully fermented black tea from Pu'er. And, the caffeine release is over a much longer period. It's a longer half-life.
Especially with the fat in the cacao.
Exactly.
That'll help slow it down. But I noticed that there was no drying experience in my body, which I think is good because a lot of people that drink too much coffee really get too yang and dried out.
Right.
And especially women. It causes loads of problems for women's menstrual cycles.
Yes. I mean, balance is really what we're trying to accomplish, right? It's like a balanced energy. It's sustained. It keeps you calm and grounded while providing you that lift, the upper that you're looking for in your caffeine beverage.
It's a really clean lift too. It's like a wellspring of energy rising up in you. It's not like you're jittered out or buzzed out, but you definitely A lot of the things that people use for caffeine replacements, they're not potent enough. So
Right.
people end up feeling like something's missing, like
Totally.
you can't get there. But for most people, I think you'd find that's a suitable lift.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Definitely. I mean, it's what I drink every morning. Before Nandika, I was drinking the black and green tea together
Yeah.
because you get the full spectrum of, tea polyphenols, right?
Yeah.
If it's green, if it's black, it's different. The polyphenols get metabolized in the fermentation process. And so you get all the way from the catechins in the green tea to the theaflavins in the black tea.
Yeah.
And so it's very comprehensive. That's why I love it so much.
Yeah, when we last podcasted together, I know we got lots to catch up on, but this is on my mind. You taught me something that went against my own physiological understanding, but turned out that you were right. You were talking about meditation and how you use your black teas or various teas to support your meditation. I thought, well, God, that's going to push you sympathetic, which tends to make people's minds, move faster and fill their heads with more thoughts. And I thought, well, I'm going to give it a try. So because I normally would do any kind of meditation work before I would have espresso or any of your black teas or any of the, green teas that lift you up. But
Right.
I thought, well, let me see how this works. And I actually, strangely enough, found that my mind was even clearer.
Yeah.
And I didn't find my mind jumping around.
Yes.
And I think, I always do it first thing in the morning. I get up at 3:30 in the morning, so it's real quiet. Everything's real
That's
dark
the perfect time.
and quiet. And
Yeah.
I found that my inner vision was excellent. It was really beautifully supported. So I wanted to say thank you because of my understanding of physiology, that kind of went countercurrent
Right.
to everything that physiology texts would tell you,
Sure.
or even just kind of strangely common sense would say, don't buzz yourself up before you try to meditate.
Yeah.
But it's not like you get buzzed up unless you overdo it. But I just felt like more turned on
Right.
was how I would describe it.
Right.
It's like my brain was awake, my body was awake.
Yeah.
And so instead of like meditating when you're early in the morning and you're kind of still coming into yourself, it was like it brought all of me into the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so happy to hear you say that. The thing that Buddhist monks don't give up is tea. Like if you go to Tibet, you go to India, it's like a staple in the monastery, right? And I think in those situations, people are drinking black tea. And so it's really quite conducive. The usage of green tea in Zen monasteries is more common. So, the green formats with matcha. And there's something very powerful to be said about it. I mean, it's like the optimal flow state, the alpha brainwave activity generation. It gives you just the right amount of alertness without amping you up too much.
Yeah.
And I think the L-theanine helps a lot. And, the myth about tea is, Buddha fell asleep in meditation and he was so upset that he cut his eyelids off.
Oh, shit.
And they fell to the ground and grew into a tea tree.
Right. I think you mentioned that in our first podcast. I forgot that.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. It's a great story.
Yeah.
Speaking of matcha, you've got a couple of matchas. And one of them, when you make it and you stir it, it makes, what I love about it is it makes kind of like crema on an espresso.
Yeah.
Except it's a beautiful green crema.
Totally.
And that's a really amazing tea. I can't remember which one it is because you do have like two matchas, don't you?
Yeah. So we have a fasting matcha, and I think the one you're talking about is the sun goddess matcha.
Yes.
And so that crema is highly specific in these schools of tea ceremony in Japan. They go crazy over every detail, but the size of those bubbles, it has to look like fish eyes and not be bigger than that.
Oh,
and
God.
so, it's a very important, and it, depending on how you grind it, if you stone mill it versus you machine grind it, the bubble sizes are different. Yeah.
And is it because of the fish eyes and the Tai Chi symbol? Is that what it's linked to?
Quite possibly.
Because, they're classically considered fish swimming with each other. Yeah, no, it's good. We have a lot to talk about, and we covered a lot in our first podcast, but it's been a while since I've seen you, and I've had a lot of time with your teas, and I wanted to say thank you for showing me that sometimes our ideas, even though like my ideas of not overstimulating yourself before meditation's founded in really solid physiology, but sometimes you just find out that things are just not always directly applicable in every situation, and it's so for me, it's just like I test everything. Like I don't, if I would have been too rigid and said, well, I'm not going to try that, Simon's wrong, I wouldn't have found out. And because of your tip, I can say I've had 5 years of better meditation. So thank you for giving me a chance to not be dogmatic.
Well, I mean, that is a profound compliment, Paul, coming from you. So, I mean,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that tremendously.
And I've wanted to get you back on the podcast because that first one was really an amazing podcast. I learned so much in that podcast because tea is something we're all kind of familiar with because it's like a staple of, mornings and evenings
Right.
and lunches and, it's like always around. But I thought, I'm going to ask Simon about the history of tea. And it was such an amazing story. And there was, neat things in there that I had no idea about. God, so much has happened. I mean, since you and I did that podcast, COVID happened, the LA fires have happened, and you've had to deal with a lot of stuff, and your company has grown, and you recently informed me that teas are not even the main thrust of your business anymore. So I'd love to go on the journey with you, and I'd love to hear more about your spiritual practices and what you've been up to with that, because
Yeah.
I know that you're like me, that's a very important part of your life. And
Right.
I love the Taoist philosophy, and I like things that are kind of connected to nature,
Right.
not
Right.
like the Abrahamic religions are all sky god religions. So God's up there, you're
Right.
down here, and you're fallen sinners. And, to me, that's a hard pill to swallow because my experiences of God are far too many of, I've had so many direct experiences of union with God and the universe that
Mm.
when I read stuff that does not match what I know to be true from direct experience, it makes me sad because of how many people get brainwashed by that stuff and never really get to what I would call real spirituality. But
Right.
Taoist practices, Qigong, Tai Chi, those are things that I did 18 years of daily Tai Chi, and Master Feng Hao, as you know, he was my primary teacher. And
We share a master, so we're technically spiritual, kung fu brothers.
Right on.
Yeah.
And, I went all the way to zero with Tai Chi. I went to complete non-dual union with not even an identity and name. There was
Amazing.
nothing. It was
Yeah.
the craziest thing. It took quite a number of years to get to that experience. I'd had
Right.
many union experiences where I was one with
hmm
the universe, but I still had an identity. I was still able to be in this state of, oh my God, and realize I'm in a state of complete oneness.
Right.
But I finally, shockingly, without any sense that it was happening, one day I was doing Tai Chi, and I was just, I typically would get home because I was doing Egyptian sun gazing as well. And I would get home and sun gaze while the sun went down. But this time I just said, well, I'm going to just do my Tai Chi practice today.
Right.
And it was right next to one of my stone water chargers. And it was, the sun was probably 30 minutes from going down. So I imagine it was like 5 o'clock at night. Finally, at 7:40 p.m., Angie came out of the house and down the steps into my rock garden. And she said, Paul, we have been calling you for over an hour. Your
Right.
dinner is ice cold. We didn't know where you were at.
Yes.
And hearing her voice brought me back in.
Right.
But I had no idea where I was, who I was. I was in a state of complete and utter emptiness.
Mm.
And I was so shocked because everything was all wet.
Right.
When I started, it was still bright out. It was like a half an hour from sundown. And I thought I'd been out there for maybe 30 or 40 minutes. And
Yeah.
it had been from 5 till about 7:40.
Right.
And my body was doing the Tai Chi ruler the whole time, but I was completely and utterly gone. No identity,
Yeah.
no name, no nothing.
Right.
So, Wu Chi.
Wu Ji.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
But anyhow, tell me about yours. I just
Yeah.
wanted to share, since we share Fong Ha, and he's the one that taught me that, and all the different ways to get there. I want to hear your journey.
I mean, I think, my source material for my practice is the I Ching. And, it's interesting that you say that, it's based on natural observation.
Mm-hmm.
So, the I Ching, the Book of Changes, the word Yi is the symbol for the sun and the moon.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so, from the very beginning, people observed the change in their environment in the universe and then
Yes.
started to observe patterns when those things happened. And they started recording this. And over the course of thousands of years, it took thousands of years to compile the I Ching and
Yeah.
was even later like edited and annotated and all of these
So
things.
it's not from a turtle's back then.
It may have been, it was written on turtles' backs as a form of, writing and recording, but it was over a period of millennia that it was compiled. And so you imagine these ancients where they don't have any distractions whatsoever.
No.
And they're sitting there and they're observing the day and the night and the seasons
And the stars.
and the stars. And, if there's a mountain, how does that change? If there's a mountain and a lake, how does that change? And so you add in these elements, and the I Ching is said to comprise every known possible human experience as a book of oracle.
Yeah.
And so, it's so based on nature, and therefore, there's the qian, which is the sky,
Mm-hmm.
and yang, and then there's kun, which is the yin and the earth and the
Mhm.
receptive, right? And so there's very much both, like, the dualistic
Mm-hmm.
concept. And, in your meditation, you reach the highest level, which is the return to the void. So, there's this thing in Tai Chi practice, you use the Jing, convert it to Qi,
Mhm.
prana, and then you convert the Qi into Shen, which is the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you've achieved that, you return to the emptiness, the void, Huan
Mhm.
Kong. So, you were in a complete state of zero, basically. And so that's the ultimate progression.
That's beautiful. And what was so trippy about it is it's the Tai Chi ruler is an active technique. It's not like a sitting
That's the best
meditation.
thing. Yeah.
But I was walking around for days thinking, how was it that my body just kept doing that breathing in the
Yeah.
perfect rhythm with the Tai Chi ruler movement while I was completely and utterly gone?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
still to this day, I find that a mystery.
Right. I mean, that's one of the coolest things about Tai Chi is that it's moving Qigong,
Yeah.
and the still is the sitting. And because, you can go from sitting to standing, and then from standing to movement.
Mm-hmm.
And all the concepts and principles of the I Ching and of the Tao Te Ching are exactly the same principles that apply to the moving practice and the sitting practice, which of course also applies to everything in life.
Yes.
Relationship with family, with work, with, adversity, with, things that make you angry or sad or happy.
Yes.
The things are completely integrated.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the things I love so much about Tai Chi is that, you've gone from a still to a moving, and that is a very important bridge, I think, to taking the moving into, the living prayer that you talk about.
Yes. Yeah.
Where, everything in your life is an opportunity to practice in the
Yes.
spirit gym, right?
Yeah.
And so, the transcendental nature of the philosophical components I find just so remarkable, that it can be so internal and yet manifest in such external ways, and in pretty much in every single setting that you encounter in life.
Yeah. It's interesting that you use those words, because what a lot of people forget is that everything that appears outside of us is actually inside of us,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Our rods and cones are, our eye is just like a camera. The eye
Right.
itself doesn't see,
Right.
just like a camera doesn't
Yeah.
see what it's taking a picture of. It just
Yeah.
picks up light and it puts it on a photographic plate and
Right.
it's captured.
Right.
The rods and cones are just dealing with different wavelengths of light. You could measure them with an oscilloscope or any
Yeah.
thing that measures angstroms,
Yeah.
and it would be just data.
Right.
So the whole world is appearing inside of us.
Right.
And I think
And we're
because,
projecting it out.
and we are projecting it out.
Yeah, it's
And-
from
and-
inside.
And when it comes to the I Ching, we are the 5 elements in Chinese
Yes.
philosophy, or the 4 elements in Western alchemy. We are the earth, the water, the fire, the air, and the essence.
Right.
I find the I Ching quite fascinating because having spent a lot of time studying quantum physics and cosmology and ecosystems, really what you're seeing, in my opinion, is if you were to look at, say, David Bohm's model of quantum physics, which has the implicate infolded order, the immeasurable order of spirit,
Mhm.
if you will, which manifests itself as the explicate unfolded realm of the
Right.
created universe and everything in it, that the I Ching's really kind of telling me, from my perspective, how spirit manifests in nature.
Right.
And because we are nature,
Precisely.
so when you think of yourself as a copy of the universe, a microcosm of the universe and a microcosm of the world, you can see how the I Ching is actually showing you how what I would call intelligent energy, because the whole universe is energy, information, and frequency, how that actually flows through the cycle of life
Right.
and flows even in our psyche.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, the flow is the absolute most important concept in the I Ching and also in Taoism and TCM, and I think generally in health and obviously acupuncture. Everything is based upon, TCM, acupuncture, feng shui, the art of war, Sun Tzu. These are all things that are based upon the I Ching. But once you have blockage is when you get sick.
Yeah.
A certain part of your body is blocked, the energy doesn't flow.
Yeah.
Acupuncture comes to release it.
Yeah.
And it flows again. But the same thing happens with things you encounter in life, right?
Yes.
My teacher told me, you know, I have a Tai Chi teacher in Vancouver, Sam Tam, and he'll say, Simon, ask me anything you want, and I'll go to him with different problems with my practice. But he would tell me, I just went to see him a couple of months ago, and he said, he never answers the question directly, but but he'll say, Simon, just think
Neither
about
does
us.
the I Ching.
Yeah, neither does the I Ching. And he'll say, look at this room that we're sitting in. Now, you keep trying to look for an answer and you think you can find it because the lights are on and you want to make the lights brighter so you can search for that thing, the answer you're looking for. It could be some issue with work or your life or some health issue. And he said relationship. And he said, imagine suddenly all the lights go off and the exit sign gets illuminated. And that's the path, right? And he's like, that's basically opening the blockage, right? Is when your yi or your intention is overly focused on something, you don't get to the point where you can have your shen manifest. And the way he compares it is that your intention is like a flashlight. The shen is like the sun.
The shen is the flow of chi, isn't it?
The shen is the spirit, the soul,
okay.
that guides you. So
I have to keep a dictionary handy when I'm reading these books.
There are only a few terms. I'll write them down for you. But, when you ask your soul something, that's when you're shining the sun on something and it all gets illuminated, right? And so maybe the problem that you had wasn't even the real problem, or it wasn't a problem at all. So it's it's super fascinating. But this whole idea of kind of tension and blockage and relaxation and flow, the constant, I think, struggle in life is to find that flow and that and releasing the tension, right? And the whole body is a mini universe, and we live in an outer universe. That's like the foundation of TCM. It's actually the foundation of how we create products at Pique is to help people over the seasons, over the weather patterns, over the fluctuation of their health as they age. Women go through perimenopause, menopause. Your body is constantly evolving. The exterior environment is constantly evolving. The fires in the Palisades is a whole different set of environmental factors. And so our products, the practice, all the medicine that you have, it's meant to help you rebalance in conjunction with the external universe. The inner and outer have to be in harmony, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really the kind of the foundation of my practice and what we're trying to do. By the way, the craziest story of how I got into the I Ching, I have to tell it in case people are interested in how to access this book. I was always keen on it. I owned a copy from the point I was in college, even before that in high school. And it's a very hard thing to read from cover to cover. It's virtually
Yeah.
impossible.
I've
Yeah.
never read it from cover to cover. I've read introductions in several different translations.
Right. Well, Jung has an amazing
Yeah,
introduction,
the
right?
golden, the ancient,
The
golden
Wilhelm
flower.
version.
Wilhelm, I've
The
got it.
Wilhelm edition is the
Yeah.
one. That's my most given book, by the way,
Is that right?
to people. Yeah.
I
But
love the Wilhelm translation of the Tao Te Ching as well.
yeah. But he's, that's the best. I mean, it went from German. The Germans have always had this incredible resonance with Eastern philosophies. I think Goethe was very inspired. But in his introduction, Jung says that this is, as a man of science, I don't know how to think about how to approach this, but given this is a book of oracle, I should use it as a book of oracle.
Mm-hmm.
And so he throws the coin method, and he asks the I Ching, how should I write this introduction?
Mm-hmm.
And he gives him this perfect answer about how it's a momentous period in time, and it has to be introduced to the world, to the West, and all of this stuff. So, anyways, for fun I threw the coins, and I didn't believe in it enough to ask a serious question. So I said, what am I having for dinner tonight? I was eating dinner with my mom, and it went to the one hexagram inside the book that talks about food in a specific way. There's only one. And I read the passages, and they're changing lines and changing lines. And then I went to have dinner. And as the dishes arrived, it had described every single dish that I was eating at dinner.
Wow.
And I was like, just completely fucking blown away, right? Like, imagine that. And it was from that point onwards that this, intense faith and, belief and conviction in the I Ching and the power of these like observed natural patterns, born from that seed and sprouted into all, and it manifested in all these ways, right? But for people that want to access the book, try using it as an oracle, because you get intensely interested in the answer because you've asked a question.
Yeah.
And as you use it, you start to read more and more and more of the I Ching, and that's where the power gets unlocked.
Yes. I've used it on various occasions. I'm more of a tarot practitioner,
Right.
which is something I've been doing for probably 14 years consistently now, and studied extensively. But I like to, sometimes I just wonder what the I Ching's going to have to say. But I wanted to share something funny with you. I was reading a book about the I Ching written by some Western scholars. I think it might have been Jane Houston's husband.
Right.
And a couple of others. They were kind of in dialogue talking about the I Ching, and they were talking about how they were with a bunch of people that were meeting about the I Ching and talking about it. And one of these guys was like a very left brain scientific materialist type.
Yeah.
And he was saying, I don't even put any faith in any of that kind of stuff. It's childish,
Right.
And so they said to him, well, why don't you ask it a question and see what happens?
Yeah.
And it was a book that somebody had translated so that when you read it, it's more Westernized. It's not
Right.
like the I Ching can be very diverse. The snow will be in the mountains, and you have to kind of think, okay, what does this really mean?
Right.
He asked it something like, are you real? And the answer was, not if you don't take me seriously. I just was cracking up because the I Ching was like almost like chiding him, saying,
yes.
it's no more real than you are.
Right. Exactly.
We live in a world where stress is constant and distractions are endless. If you're like many of my clients juggling family, career, training, and spiritual practice, you've probably felt the toll it takes on your clarity and vitality. You may even be someone that can't get through the day without drinking coffee, even when it's not making you feel better anymore. That's why I'm excited to share something that's become part of my daily ritual, Nandaka by Pique. Nandaka means the sword of wisdom. It isn't your typical energy booster or coffee substitute. Nandaka is a sacred blend of organically grown adaptogenic and nootropic botanicals designed not to mask your fatigue, but to nourish your nervous system, feed your brain, and support deep, sustainable energy from the inside out. That's what true vitality is all about. Unlike most mushroom products that are stuffed with mycelium grown on grain, Nandaka is made from 100% fruiting bodies. That's where the medicine lives. You get the full spectrum of benefits of lion mane for mental clarity and nerve regeneration, reishi and chaga for modulating stress and inflammation, and ceremonial cacao rich in anandamide, the bliss molecule, to uplift your mood and calm your system. Even the cacao butter serves a higher purpose, acting as a delivery mechanism to carry these nutrients deep into your brain. When I take Nandaka before podcasting, teaching, writing, or conducting a therapy session, I notice something profound. The energy is steady, the focus is clean, and my creativity flows without resistance. It supports the body, the mind, and the soul all at once. And here's the truth. If your brain and nervous system are overstimulated and undernourished, you'll always be inviting burnout. That's why I don't treat the symptoms. I go to the source. And Nandaka aligns with that philosophy. I'm truly impressed with Nandaka, and that's why I'm excited to share this powerful, effective support and nourishment to help you stay vital throughout each day, to bring you many of the core nutrients most everybody's brain, nervous system, and body needs today. Currently, there are over 18,000 five-star reviews on Pique's amazing products, and Nandaka is trusted by some of the top minds in wellness for a reason, including me. These products actually work. Tune in, reconnect, nourish your core. Try Nandaka and feel the shift. Nandaka is a powerful ally, and right now, you can get 20% off for life, plus a free starter kit with your first order and a rechargeable frother and helpful glass beaker for mixing your Nandaka exclusively at piquelife.com/Paul Chek. Once again, that's piquelife.com/PAULCHEK. piquelife.com/Paul Chek for 20% off for life plus a free starter kit with your first order.
I don't use it as a book of oracles in a consistent way.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to, actually, because I think a very high level of seriousness has to be brought to that process.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't go and keep asking if you don't like the answer, or you don't.
Then you're just a child.
Yeah, and things like that. So, I think. Through using it initially, I got exposed to enough parts of it to access other texts like the Tao Te Ching and the Art of War, and start to grasp fundamental concepts about traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture, and obviously my Tai Chi practice. But I think this whole idea of Tai Chi and Wu Ji is very important, because it's you have the absolute and the dualistic.
Yeah.
And that's something that transcends all religions.
Mm-hmm.
And, for me, it's like bad things happen and good things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are good people and bad people. And, I think the most powerful experience for me and the most important part of my practice has been understanding that they're the same.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're actually the same, and they're these, like, is it good fortune? What did something bad that happened, like, did it actually turn out to be good? And it's all about this perspective and this, like, internal projection of the light and the movie that you're watching, right? And so starting a business is like endless amounts of adversity, like backbreaking, cancer causing, family destroying sort of, types of things to start a business and scale it. It's not
to keep it
growing and keep it healthy.
Profitable.
Yeah.
Employees. My
Yeah.
God, that's a lot of work.
It's a ton of work. And I think over time the lessons that I've gained from the practice are that I don't really get bothered by adversity nearly as much, and oftentimes I almost always just let it happen and sit with it and observe it, much like observing a thought in my meditation. And I've actively started looking for the other side, because with every it's like the thing you said, you dig out 3 foot of dirt, there's 3 foot of dirt, there's a 3 foot hole, but there's 3 foot of dirt next to it. It's the same thing when good things and bad things happen, right?
Yes.
And so I don't celebrate things. I don't get, like, exuberant about great things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get down and depressed and upset when terrible things happen. And in fact, I always look, if something, bad happens, I look for that mound of dirt that's going to materialize. It could be a matter of time. It could be a different perspective. It could take a long time, but it's there.
Yeah, it's, Tao means the way, or sometimes called the middle path. And interestingly, tarot means royal road, which is pointing to the same thing,
Yeah,
balance,
interesting. I didn't know that.
not too much, not too little.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, with business and circumstances, I would get irritated. Like there's been times where I've had some tough financial situations. Like
Totally.
we had to can one distributor that got over 200,000 pounds behind in their payments, and we finally said,
Wow.
we can't let this keep going on.
Yeah.
So I had to eat 200,000 pounds, which at that time was over 400,000 US dollars.
Wow.
Then I had
That's a
another
lot. Yeah.
distributor in another country that I had to can at $165,000 in the hole. And the same story happens. Oh,
Yeah.
an excuse will catch up, another excuse. And then I'm like, okay, I've got employees to pay. I
Yeah.
got a family to feed,
Right.
hey, I can't just keep playing this game. But what I found as I matured and got more centered in myself is that each of these events somehow opened the door to a greater possibility.
Totally.
A simple example to make my point is I got to the point, after Penny and I were on the road for 25 years, moving all over the world, constantly teaching and building the institute and, doing all the things you got to do to grow an educational institution or build any international business.
Mhm.
And I would like to travel with my vaporizer and bring the things that gave me a sense of comfort while I was on the road. But sometimes we just didn't have this space or whatever, and I just wouldn't want to go. I'm like, I don't want to go live that way. I'm tired of living out of hotel rooms and
Yeah.
eating in restaurants. I just, I could feel my body was getting stressed. And so I would say to my soul, I really don't want to do this trip. And so I'd be thinking about Penny saying, let's cancel it because I just don't have any desire to go travel and teach and
Yeah.
live that way. I'm just too tired. And my soul would say, don't worry, things will be taken care of. And so many times this happened. I'd land,
Yeah.
and within an hour of being somewhere, one of my students would show up, bring me a vaporizer, bring me a bunch
Wow.
of herbs and everything that I ever dreamed of and more.
Yeah.
And say, here, I've got an extra one, or you can use mine. I'm happy to support you. I know you like your vaporizer.
Yeah.
And this would happen all over the world. And I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get the picture here. The picture is that if I actually put too much emphasis on what I don't have, it will manifest. But if
Right.
I open the door to possibility
Yes.
and just trust the Tao,
Yes.
things
yes.
are a lot better. And so it's took me a long time to
Yeah.
learn to trust the Tao.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the flashlight and the sunlight thing
Yeah.
too. I mean, I don't know if I told you this story, but I had 3 operations in my 20s. The
Yeah.
last one was a sleep apnea operation that I did at Stanford. I was studying there, and it's like between my MBA 1 and 2. But sleep apnea is not something you get an operation for. You can
Not typically.
not typically.
It's almost always food intolerance. I've helped many people cure that.
Yeah. But the standard of care is a CPAP machine, and the doctors there had convinced me that I needed this operation. They invented it. It was the best thing ever. Non-invasive, high success rate, and I did it, and it was a catastrophe. My sleep apnea got worse, created tons of scar tissue, and then I got a jawbone infection because and I didn't even know that they operated on my jawbone till I got the infection. And I was like, "What? This doesn't make sense. You didn't do anything to my jawbone." They said, "Well, actually, we cut a hole in it, pulled that piece of bone that we cut out to move your tongue out of the way, and then put a screw in there. And unfortunately, it's infected, so we got to take the screw out." I had to be on intravenous antibiotics for 2 months,
That's terrible.
going into a heart valve. But that was the ultimate pivotal point for my life,
I bet.
because it was a physical transformation that that tied to a career change. That's why I went to get an MBA, and then that tied to me discovering meditation. All happened within 18 months. In retrospect, I consider it the ultimate greatest blessing ever, because all 3 of those operations, because I would never have started Pique otherwise. And Pique is something that gives me endless amounts of joy and happiness and satisfaction, and is something I could see myself doing till literally the day I die.
Yeah,
I don't
me
want to
too.
do anything else. You know what I
I
mean?
understand. That's when you have found your calling, your sense
Yes.
of how your spirit wants to manifest itself in the world.
Yeah. And I think you actually told me, Paul, because a lot of my issues were respiratory, You told me that respiratory disease is linked to your soul grieving.
Grieving, yeah.
Yes, yes, and I think that what the career path that I was on and what I was doing with my life was such a huge departure from what I was meant to do,
Yeah.
and it took it took those painful lessons for me to aggressively course correct. And I'm
Yeah.
very happy that it actually happened when it was between my 29th and 30th year.
Hmm.
It's when Buddha left home, by the way.
Mm.
And so I'm happy that it happened early.
Yeah.
And it was
And
powerful.
I think one of the important things is that you were aware, you were looking, you were
I was
asking
looking.
questions, you were
Yeah.
paying attention. And I think a lot of people have things like that happen, be it surgeries or
Hmm.
loss of a loved one or any number of, shocking life, potentially things that can really turn your life inside out. But they stop looking. They stop
Mm,
being open to the mystery
right.
um, and they tend to put too much trust in medical doctors that they're to fix them. Um, but I think you're talking about an event and a transformation in your life in which you had to be open to the possibilities, like I had to be open to the possibility that maybe I wouldn't have to go without a vaporizer and have some
Right.
things that kind of just for me on the road. And
Yeah.
lo and behold, they manifested. But I think it's hard when you're in a state of fear or you feel some kind of threat to your health, to your finances, to your relationship, to
Yeah.
your stability. People tend to close down. But I think the real point I'm trying to drive is that those are the points which we need to actually slow ourselves down,
Right.
take more of a big picture look at our life and the situation and the circumstances, and really go into our heart, for lack of a better term. I mean, I could say soul or spirit, but for a lot of people
Hmm.
that's too flimsy. But really just sit with our heart and just see, what's appearing before us. And, like the Taoists and the people like that, they would be watching, if they were in a crisis like that, it would be like, what's happening in nature? What, am I part of something bigger? Is there
Yes.
something moving me? Is this a circumstance of my own creation, or is it just the result of the way the chi is flowing through the environment? So my key point for everybody is, as hard as it is, you know, sit still under a tall tree
Yes.
and really just try not to jump to conclusions or make snap decisions about the next surgery or the next drug or
Yeah.
going bankrupt or whatever it is. And just Jung calls that holding the tension of the opposites and just
Right.
sitting with it. The alchemists call that cooking. Just cook in it,
Mm,
stew in it.
right.
Don't rush to fix it,
Right.
because
Right.
sometimes if you let the opposites interact with each other, they create a transcendent third, which is a greater possibility than you can get if you're polarized to either side.
Right.
So I
Right.
think that's a lesson that it took me a lot of my life to learn, and my dream is that younger people learn that sooner,
Totally.
because it
Totally.
can make your life a lot more magical.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the original Taoists, they were alchemists, and the Dantian is the triple burner.
Yes.
So when you say cooking, is literally go and meditate and focus on the Dantian and do some qigong.
Yeah.
You might produce some gold out of lead.
Yeah.
In realization, but yeah, I mean, I think the danger when one encounters adversity is kind of victim mentality, right? It's like,
Yes.
oh, why did this happen to me? It's I'm so unlucky. I think that's
Yes.
like the most dangerous and risky and also toxic approach, and I think taking responsibility for those things, as crazy as it sounds and as unrighteous as it sounds, when bad things happen, to be able to own it as part of a lesson in the course book that God has handed you.
Hmm.
I think that's the really difficult thing to do. It's especially when many people are indeed victim of terrible things that happen. It's like,
Yes.
how do you go and look at that as and take the responsibility for that lesson? It's like, how do you do that?
I think one of the things that takes a fair bit of time for most people to come to the awareness of is that we are actually co-creators in all the circumstances of our life and
Absolutely.
in the world collectively.
Absolutely.
And so if you're still acting out the child, then you're going to externalize it. You're going to become the victim, or you're going to,
Yes.
stay a child and kick, scream, and blame somebody else. But when we look, for example, that we're all part of a family, we're all part of a circle of relationships
Mhm.
and friendships, and we're all part of a community or a society or a culture, which is all part of the world. And, you know, the Chinese have a strong worship of ancestors because of the belief that they're still
Right.
involved in their life, right?
Yes.
And that their spirit is present. It's not like they're gone, And if you look at Mark Wu Lin's work, his famous book "It Didn't Start with You," which is all on ancestral trauma and how it flows through the DNA and very strongly influenced for 3 generations. But there's good scientific research looking at people from Holocaust survivors and other indicators showing that it could very well go 14 or more generations back.
Wow.
So what I'm saying is we not only have everybody we're creating with, we have our ancestral influences, then we have our own personal unconscious, our own personal shadow that holds all our fears and repressed material. Then we have a collective unconscious and we have a collective shadow.
Hmm.
There's a great old saying, I'm sure you've heard it: give me the strength to change what I can and the wisdom to know what I can't. And I think if we take a minute and just say, okay, what is my contribution to this situation?
Right.
Then we can at least look at the aspects of,
Yes.
the formula that we can change. Like if you're in a husband-wife situation, you're each contributing something to the formula.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
Yeah.
And you may not be able to change your wife's opinion on vaccinations or on how to invest money or whether the kid should be breastfed or not, or any of these other
Right.
things.
Right.
But you can work with your own half of the formula.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things we can do to become aware of how much we can influence what seems to be an externally driven process, or a process that we project as somebody else's fault. Because whenever we're in relationship, we're 50% of it. Like I'm half the relationship with you right now.
Yes.
So if I'm 10% not here,
Yeah.
there's 10% you can't access, and there's the 10% of me that's gone. That creates a 20% deficit in the relationship.
Yeah.
So I can improve the relationship by bringing all of me here,
Yes.
or you all yourself here. I think the point I'm making is simply that as hard as it is, we can say, how am I contributing to whatever it is that seems to be such a problematic situation, and work from that end of it. Sometimes it's simply a matter of realizing that that's not a healthy relationship to be in,
Right.
whether it be a food relationship, a friend relationship, a business relationship, a marital relationship, a sexual relationship, a financial relationship. Sometimes the message is, this is not a healthy relationship to be in. And a lot of people have such a degree of codependency, they don't have the strength to step out of something that's clearly not good for them.
Yeah. And I think that's where the spiritual practice becomes so important. We are guided by our souls
Totally, yeah.
because we're in touch with what it's trying to tell us, and that's facilitated by having some sort of a mindfulness practice.
You got to have some
Yeah.
inner listening
Yeah.
skills.
That's totally.
Our world is so externalized. Like I one of the things I see the most in my patients and clients is what I call externalization of the soul.
Hmm.
Their sense of who they are is not inside of them. It's in how much money they have, what car they
External
drive, what
reference
clothes they wear.
points. Yeah.
Everything's
And
an
metrics.
external,
Yeah.
like you say, a reference point. So the whole self is projected. And what happens is if you lose your status, your rank, your fame, the athlete gets injured and can't play anymore and they don't know who they are,
Yeah.
then your whole sense of yourself can come crashing down.
Right.
And if you don't find yourself inside, then that's the gateway usually to depression and eventually suicide for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, I think that believing in reincarnation and the concept of karmic debts, from a faith and religious and spiritual point of view is it contributes a lot to helping understand tragedy, personal tragedy. And the ability to understand a karmic seed being planted and its fruition is so incredibly difficult and advanced that it's unfathomable for most
Yeah.
even spiritual practitioners. But if you don't have that and you don't believe in reincarnation and karma, there's what you talked about, the DNA and the epigenetics and that sort of expression. But a lot of very good people have bad things happen to them and they can't understand it because they've never done anything bad. But it's like you say, it could be an ancestral thing. It could be a past life thing, a karmic thing, and I think that actually helps a lot. And it's like when that adversity presents itself, it really is an opportunity for you to respond in a multitude of ways that instantly creates more karmic effects or more, genetic, epigenetic programming that will have to be resolved down
Yes.
the road.
It is complex. We're talking about life. Like, we're talking about a flow of data that is beyond our own conception. I mean, we process a lot of data. I think it was Robert O. Becker who wrote The Body Electric said, and this was probably 1989 when The Body Electric came out. He said at that time, we were processing more information in a day than a person would in the year 1900 in their entire lifetime.
Wow.
And so imagine with the doubling of computer processing power every 18 months, which now isn't even true because I recently read David Chalmers' book, Reality Plus, and I think it was that book that he mentioned that the computer processing capabilities are doubling even faster than 18 months now.
Right.
So when you look at the amount of, just think of the information, think of the earth as a living being and say, well, how much information is moving through the earth every 24 hours? Like just the planet itself, let alone the sun and everything else involved. The complexity of life is it's often very hard to even begin to wrap your head around. So I think when we realize that we're part of something so much more vast than we can conceive of, it really opens the door to the importance of being able to empty yourself, because the self, which the soul is an inherent part of, in my spirit gym model, the self contains the unconscious, the ego, the soul, and the highest self, because each of those has a unique function. So those are all parts of the self. So the self of any one of us couldn't exist without the entire universe.
Right.
So even when we're dealing with something ourself or in ourself, we have access to the wisdom and the data, for lack of a better word, that's inherent throughout the whole universe. But it's way too vast for the ego mind to even begin to wrap its head around. And because the ego only processes information in series, research on the brain shows that the brain produces about 30 billion bits a second of information. And the brain selects between 10 and 100 bits, all of which is primarily based on what the brain perceives to be necessary for your survival. Point is, one cell is just a massively complicated thing. A body's a massively complicated thing. And a universe is even vastly more complicated. But the soul processes information in parallel. The soul's aware of everything that's happening. So it knows what's in your unconscious that the ego can't see. It knows where the sun is because it's inherent to the sun. The sun's part of the unconscious. So what I'm saying is that if you think of, okay, what's the difference between parallel processing and series processing? It's massive. A modern computer is a series processor. A quantum computer is a parallel processor. It can work with superpositional states. But I think that the soul is capable of working with superpositional states, because there's been many times in my life where issues were too complex, say with a patient. Like a lot of the people that come to see me for help have had 10, 15, 20, 30 surgeries. They've got, many major health issues at the same time. They've got complicated family lives, et cetera, et cetera. And there's just way too much. He's like, with a person like that, you can almost start anywhere and be just as accurate as anywhere else. But what I found many, many years ago in my career that's helped me help a lot of people is, first I would gather all the data, look at it from a left brain approach, but then I would just sit and ask my soul to connect me to that person's soul. And I would say, how can I best serve you? And what's really going on? And I would be told, talk to them about, what happened to them when they were 5. And it might have been sexual abuse by their father or something like that.
Right.
And, the first mention of it, there would just be tears and often catharsis. And they would say to me, like, that was not mentioned in the paperwork. So like, why are you asking about that? I never told you anything about it. Well, depending on who it is, I might say, well, I asked your soul what was really driving this. And I would get to some of these really core issues really often that you would never have found with a left brain kind of series approach. This causes that, like a chain reaction perception because it's too complex. And so what I'm saying really is I think having a meditation practice, and I think not just meditation in the classical sense, because a lot of people have a hard time sitting and just doing nothing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I went to Fong Ha when I was developing my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. I said, look, I got a lot of people that even people that do Tai Chi, they're so trapped in their head because they're always worried about their form and is their technique perfect, and they can't relax.
Yeah.
I said, I need some techniques that are so simple, anyone can do it. I can teach them in 5 minutes and they don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
And so I brought him a bunch of the concepts and he said, Paul, all of these things will work, but why don't you let me teach you some of the practices that I use that fit what you're trying to accomplish. So that's what I did with him for 3 years, is we worked on very simple methods, like the Tai Chi ruler. I mean, that's really simple.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if we don't get to the point where we can enter into what I would call a conscious relationship with our soul or our unconscious, we can't parallel process.
Totally.
And so we're always stuck with the, like the ego is like a straw, and the unconscious is like an ocean.
Right.
And sometimes to understand oceanic problems, we have to have oceanic process.
Yes.
And so I think taking time each day to do something that, whether it's breathing, whether it's moving practice, Qigong. I got certified in medical Qigong probably in 2000. I found that very simple and very beautiful. I helped a lot of my patients with these very simple Qigong exercises. And I think but the people of the world would do so much better if they just took a few minutes a day. That's why I created the zone exercises in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. That's what Fong Ha helped me put together, was the zone exercises. But I just think that for some people, when they hear us talk about meditation, Tai Chi, that's like a foreign thing to them and like, oh, I don't have time to do that. But I say to my patients that say that to me, I say, well, you've got a lot of time right now, right? You can't move.
Yeah.
You're feeling like shit. You've spent a lot of time in hospitals and a lot of time in drugstores waiting for pills and a lot of time in doctor's offices saying the same shit over and over again and getting no help.
Yeah.
So how far into I don't have time do you go before you start making time for things that really do help in the long run?
Right.
And as you know, some people got to hit rock bottom before they are ready to make that transition.
Organifi have just come out with their brand new Creatine Cherry Chews, a sports gummy designed to enhance performance and recovery. Containing the highest quality creatine monohydrate sourced from Germany, together with Vita Cherry, a tart cherry extract known for its antioxidant properties, Organifi's Creatine Cherry Chews are free from additives, sweeteners, or fillers and taste amazing. They are the perfect exercise enhancer because your body uses the creatine for energy immediately. Take 2 gummies before or after your workout, and most people will feel the difference after 2 weeks of constant use. Used regularly, creatine can increase endurance and muscle strength, help reduce muscle cell damage, assist with recovery, and support cognitive function and focus. To try Organifi's Creatine Cherry Chews and save 20% off your order, go to Organifi.com/Chek20 and use the promo code Chek20. That's Organifi.com/CHEK20, and the code for your 20% discount is Chek20.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question the world would be a better place if people meditated more. But this thing with the soul and the ocean and then the straw, that's basically the sun and flashlight analogy. So the other word for I was saying spirit, but it's basically the soul. It's like when you connect to the soul, it illuminates everything. You can see the complexities of you could see through the complexities of your patient's condition and go to the key issue or the root cause. Versus trying to, do something through a straw or looking for, something in a huge room the size of the universe with a flashlight. You're not going to get very far. Yeah, I mean, the reality is that mindfulness practices, it doesn't have to be meditation. I'm sure there are millions of ways to go about it. That's the way to connect with the soul and have it be your guide.
Slow walking is beautiful. It's
I meditate when I walk. I do Qigong walking, actually. So, I exhale for 3 steps.
That's exactly what I do.
Inhale for 1 step. Yeah, you do that too. And then tongue on the roof of the mouth.
What I do is I just time it so that I breathe in rhythm to my steps.
Right.
So typically, though, it's a 3-step inhalation. Generally, I think I like to do a 3-step pause. I try to walk slowly enough that I don't create oxygen debt, so that I don't have to speed up.
Yeah.
And I walk slowly enough that I'm not losing balance, but slow enough that I can really be present in my body. I can really feel my feet touching the earth. I can listen to the wind. I can.
Right.
I kind of mix shamanic concepts with slow walking meditation, where in shamanism, the concept of flirting is that everything's flirting with you. Everything's conscious. The trees are conscious.
Right.
The birds, the bees.
I like that, the flirting concept.
The rocks.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's called allurement. They're alluring you. They're drawing you in.
Yeah.
And so I like slow walking because for people that don't do well with seated empty mind meditations, I just say, look, just get out, walk slow enough that you don't lose your balance, that you don't bring your breaths per minute cycle up.
Yeah.
If you're walking uphill, just go real gentle.
Right.
And so you time, 1, 2, 3 steps on the inhale, 1 or 2 or 3 on the pause. I like to pause between the inhale and the exhale because I find through a lot of seated practices and breathing practices that the mind actually holds still real easily at the peak between inhalation and exhalation.
Yeah.
And also at the end of an exhalation.
Right.
So those are kind of like 2 places where equilibrium is easy to access.
Yeah.
But if we're walking and we're doing this, once you get moving, you don't have to count because your body goes into a rhythm. So your mind can just let go. But then you start seeing all sorts of things around you. Like one day when I was at the Heaven House, and I'd just done my Tai Chi, and all my instructors from all over the world had come for a meeting, and we were gathering, and I was about to start a drum circle, and everybody had gotten their drums, and I had just said, okay, go out to my Tai Chi area. And I was standing behind the house, and I had went to grab something. And as I was walking toward them to start the drum circle, a little bird, like a sparrow, came and landed on my left shoulder.
Wow.
And then another bird, I think, landed on my head.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And then
birds are very sensitive too.
Yeah.
They only gravitate towards very, very calm, positive energy.
And what was, it surprised me, it was the first time I'd ever had a bird land on me, and then 2 of them at once. And then all my instructors are looking at me like,
Yeah.
and
The
then,
Saint Francis in the flesh.
and then
Yeah.
the trippiest thing is I'm walking along the house and there was a great big lizard and
Wow.
it jumped onto my shoulder.
Wow.
So I ended up with 2 birds and a lizard hanging out on me, you know,
Wow.
and it was,
Very, very powerful and profound. Wow.
but you know, so the point,
Yeah.
there's a flirt.
Yeah.
That's what a
Yes.
shaman would call a flirt. And
Interesting. Wow.
pay attention to what that means. So
Yeah.
you then you kind of, now you're in an I Ching situation where like, okay, what does 2 birds landing on you and
Yeah.
a lizard jumping on you mean? So those are not things that the ego knows how to deal with,
No.
right? So that's when you kind of now
Yeah.
say, okay, let me just empty myself and hold the question.
Right.
Was that a message from nature? Was that a
Yeah.
message from some other source that's working through
Yeah.
the available means of getting one's attention?
Right. Right.
But either way, it was
Yeah.
quite a surprise.
I have a story about walking meditation I have to tell you.
Yeah.
So I like going backpacking. I love spending time in the Sierras. And I'll go for a couple of days with just, my backpack and nothing else. And, a progression of my practice, I went from, having this Taoist practice at the core to getting very into Paramahansa Yogananda.
I love Yogananda. Yeah.
In fact, it was Fong Ha that told me I have to do 2 things, read Autobiography of a Yogi and do Vipassana. I haven't done Vipassana yet, but so anyways, I got into that and, it's a separate story, but I moved to the Palisades to be near his lake shrine. And I have to
Right.
tell you how my house was saved. It was just an unbelievable miracle. But in any event, there was this period where the concept of the void and the absolute was like, I felt like I couldn't further my understanding of it based on the Taoist text.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got into Bhagavad Gita, I got into Paramahansa Yogananda, I did his whole course. And, it's very specific in Hinduism and in English too, because I was reading a lot of the Taoist stuff.
I've got Yogananda's course right here.
Yeah, an amazing series of books. But the classical Chinese is very hard to access. And so in English, I went down this thing. And then I got into this point in the practice, very, almost finished all the books, got to the Kriya Yoga part where you apply. And I was very torn because it's very different, the
Mhm.
Kriya Yoga, to the Taoist meditation and the microcosmic circulation, which
Yeah.
is what I do. And I was driving to Sequoia Kings National Park, and I was listening to Autobiography of a Yogi again. I love listening to
With
it.
Ben Kingsley.
Amazing.
Such a killer
yeah,
book, man.
incredible.
And he's the perfect guy.
The
to do
perfect,
this. It's
absolute
amazing.
perfect. Yeah, Gandhi and reading that, like his 2 greatest accomplishments. And so the one of the abbots called me, and I had a question. I submitted it to the Mother Center, and
NSRF. Oh, yeah,
I got the call.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm trying to figure this out. And he says, well, Simon, you don't mix pranayamas. Like, you just don't do that. And if you have something, then you have to pick one, basically. And so it wasn't really an answer except don't do both. And so, I got to Sequoia Kings. I had this whole itinerary planned out. And you have to plan a lot because you have to find water, filter it. It's very specific.
Mhm.
You can die out there. And when I got there was so much traffic going to my itinerary that I abandoned it. And I went to this lodge and asked the guy working there, what's here that's amazing? And he said, okay, do this thing. It's a loop, 30 miles. I had 2 nights.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a lot in
Mhm.
2 nights, but it's
Yeah.
it's doable. And, I plan everything with my device because, I'm not that good at reading maps,
Mm.
especially elevation topography. And so he said 20,000 feet, but it didn't factor. And I said, I got to get Wi-Fi and plan it and look at the altitude. And I didn't get to do that because there was no Wi-Fi. So I was with a buddy and we started this thing and it was a loop. And so on the first night, we and it's up and down too. It's constantly up and then up and down. And we got to the camp and I said, hey, listen, like this is no joke. Like 20,000 feet. It just hit me that it was like 30 miles, 20,000 feet in 2 nights.
Hard to breathe.
Yeah, I was like, we should seriously actually need to consider like going down. I had my dog with me, and her paws were already bleeding.
Oh, wow.
I have a service dog. She goes everywhere with me. And so, and my friend was like, no, we got to do it. He trained heavily for it. I didn't train anything for it. He's like, we got to go. Very gung ho. And so we decided to keep going. And then the next morning there was a fire that broke out nearby.
Mm.
And I had a sat device, and it was like, okay, this is going to be fine. But the rest of we committed, and every step of the way I had to do walking qigong because there's no way I would have survived otherwise. And I was worried that my dog was going to die. Every time we stopped, even before we stopped, it would be hiding in crevices, under things from heat stroke. And it was one of those things where this is very dangerous. And I did walking meditation the whole time. It turned into a pilgrimage where Paramahansa Yogananda was in a dialogue with me.
Neat.
Yeah. And I would ask him questions. I said, what should I do about this Kriya Yoga, the Taoist practice? And I got these answers that were just, beyond something I could fathom. And he said, Simon, ultimately your practice is like a tool, and you're using it to create a sculpture, and it's a sculpture of God. And he's like, it doesn't matter what tool you use. You've been sharpening this tool for 10 years, and you're going to create the same sculpture. Do you want to keep using your sharpened tools, or do you want to build a new tool from scratch? And, that was like one very powerful insight. And then, further along the walk towards the end, my dog was literally about to collapse. And I said, on this next, as we reach the next pass, there has to be shade. Like, there has to be shade, or we're not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And, and it's sunny, blue skies the whole time. And as we're going up, suddenly there's shade. And, I started, tears are running down my face at this point. And I was looking at my dog. It still wasn't enough. Eggy. And I said, there has to be some tree cover. And we're above tree line, so it's like impossible to have tree cover. And a little bit onwards, there was like a tree that we could rest under. And it was just like one of these, there's like a lone tree above tree line in a glacial, approaching a glacial lake. And, these tears are streaming down my face. But this walking meditation, the point I'm trying to make here is that you can find moments to meditate just about anywhere.
Yeah.
And when you do, experiences that are normal become experiences that are completely transcendental and transformative. And that was one of by far the most powerful experiences I've ever had in my life. It was just like, and we made it. Like, we all made it towards the end.
Your dog made it.
My dog made it. I mean, she literally went into her own. She collapsed. She couldn't even eat, which is very worrisome for a dog to stop eating.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was incredible.
You and I share something common that, there's a sort of a belief out there that, that you can't have a spiritual experience on plant medicines and, dogmatists.
Right.
We both are open to meeting God, however God manifests. And as a side note, it was very important to me. I did a year of training in 2006 with a doctor that uses psychedelic medicines, plant medicines as part of his healing practice, so I could learn how to do it properly. And then I became a member of the Native American Council and went through their process so I could do it legally and guide ceremonies through the Native American Council. And but because I have students all over the world, and a lot of them were at that time very afraid of psychedelics because they weren't nearly as popular as they are now, I had to really, inside of myself, I made a commitment. I must really stay diligent with my Tai Chi and my other natural practices like sun gazing and various types of meditation, because I want to. And I'd already had multiple samadhis through meditation with no drugs of any kind, but I knew that people were going to reject what I was saying if it came by way of plant medicines. But if I could say, look, I've had these experiences, or these are the differences. So I committed myself to sticking to Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, and various non-drug related practices, so that I could build a library of experience, so that when I went into the depths of the psychedelic practice, I could actually compare the two and not only have that knowledge, but know when it is not a good idea for someone to use psychedelics and what practices I could give them based on what their needs were. So one of the things I did with Fong Ho is I practiced a lot of different techniques and learned how to use those, and then studied many other books, whether they be Taoist books or Chinese medicine books or other techniques. So I came to the point where, after enough experience, because I've conducted now over 1,000 ceremonies with plant medicines, including my own, and I really believe that there's no difference, in the sense that it doesn't matter how you have a spiritual opening, a perception and an experience is as real as it gets. So you can read all the religious books you want. If that takes you to union, fantastic. You can meditate. If that takes you to union, fantastic. You can do plant medicines. If that brings you into a state of union or something that's really meaningful in your life, that's just as real. So I'll just preface this by saying to everyone listening that both of us are committed to both sides of this path, like both approaches.
Absolutely, absolutely. On a day-to-day basis without the medicine, I find is you can obviously do a lot more of it, but it's also something that builds upon itself in a much more, I don't want to say linear, because it's not linear, but it's
Progressive.
yeah, it's progressive. Whereas I think with the medicines, and I think it's very important, the concept of medicines, for a lot of people that don't meditate, because you instantly get a window and a doorway that
Yeah.
you have to walk through.
Yeah.
Depending on the dosage, you're going to walk through it whether you want to or not. That shows you something that you would never realize or see otherwise. And
Yes.
so, yeah, and it's a noetic experience, as
Mhm.
you say. It's something that you experience, and not something you glean through a book that is cerebral.
And
But
it's not even something you imagine, because a lot of
yeah,
people think, oh, you're just hallucinating or you're just
yeah,
imagining. Like, no, these are not hallucinations. A hallucination is sort of a distortion of the mind. These
yeah,
medicines make your mind very clear.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think having the two approaches, the practice plus the medicine, the way that I regard a journey is kind of, how did it change me? What did I learn from it?
Yeah.
Big Sur is incredibly beautiful, coastal California. Yeah. Esalen is there. The beatniks were there.
Hmm.
Incredible spiritual center, I think.
Amazing art community too.
Yeah, amazing community. And I was sitting on the terrace of the house that we were living in, and I was looking at this mountain, and it was the rapidly climaxing, the rapid onset of a powerful journey. And I was looking at this mountain, and we were sitting in the terrace because of the shade, blasting sun, um, and it was dry and dehydrating and just hot. And I looked at this mountain, and I was admiring it, and the thought started to percolate in my mind. It's like, wow, for millennia, eons, this mountain has been there, rising out of the earth, in defiance of gravity, of the
Hmm.
solar radiation. And I was like, the strength of this mountain is awe-inspiring.
Mm.
How has it weathered? Imagine just day after day going through that erosion, and the exposure. And I developed this deep connection with it, where I was in such awe and admiration, and it started, speaking to me, and it
Mm.
said, Simon, the reason. I was like, how are you so strong? And the mountain said, the reason that I'm so strong is to protect all those that are weaker than me.
Mm.
And you look in the valley that I've created,
Mm.
water can collect,
Mm.
things can grow, animals can live, they can find food, nourishment, they can be hydrated. And the awe and the admiration increased. And then at the end of this kind of dialogue, and going into these things, that there are always thoughts floating, problems floating, unintentionally I try to square them away, but they're there.
Yeah.
And I was at that point thinking about managing my business and the team, and our customers and all of this. And it said, it was like, Simon, the reason I'm strong is to protect all of those weaker. And it said, Simon, try to be like me.
Mm.
And that was just this very profound experience, and such a, like a tear creating one.
Oh yeah, you can have some
You know,
profound experiences
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I love the connection that it provides with nature and the very deep lessons. Every time I do it, I'm always, typically in a natural environment. I don't like doing it socially as much.
Hmm.
It's a fad now, but
My favorite thing is doing it
microdosing.
alone.
Yeah, doing it alone in nature is the perfect. And so just this massive download of information from nature. I find that the mycelium, yeah, I mean, like I find that you turn into a mushroom when you do
Yeah,
mushrooms.
you do. You really,
Yeah,
you at least you become one with the network of mycelium, which is the
exactly.
largest living organism on the planet. It's
Exactly.
massive.
Exactly, exactly. And then on another in another snapshot on that journey, I was looking at this tree, and again, like having this communication with this tree, and I said, out of curiosity, I said, what is it like to be like you? And in my mind, it was the most vivid picture of rainforest burning in Brazil, just like complete utter destruction of these rainforests to plant, palm or cash crop. And in another moment, it instantly flashed, and then just like the sheer intensity of that pain and the hurt and the greed and just terrible destruction, and it was so painful to see. And then in the next moment, it flashed to this beautiful tree, providing me shade, sheltering me, cooling me, again from the heat. And it was this message of complete unconditional love. It's like humanity does this terrible evil to me and to other trees, but unconditionally, I will always be here to nurture and to protect and provide shelter.
Mm,
And it was again this message of like, learn from me and
mm.
and be like me.
Yeah, was once in Ashland, Oregon, and my soul guided me to go lay down next to a creek. And there was like a little picnic table there, and it was only like 5 feet of grass, and then you're right on the edge of the creek. And I was doing a lot of mandala work back then, so I would carry an art pad and a compass to make my circle, and then I would use colored pencils or watercolor pens, and I would often do ceremonies out in nature and just sit and draw whatever wanted to come through me. But my soul said, "Go lay down next to the creek," and I laid down next to the creek, and I just sort of went into sort of like a half awake, half asleep state. And all of a sudden, it was like I was in a coffee shop, and you could hear everybody talking,
Wow.
but I was hearing all these voices and these unusual sounds, and I could tell that there was a dialogue going on.
Right.
And I said to my soul, why do I keep hearing all these voices? And my soul turned my head and eyes to the creek. And I said, "Are you saying that this is coming from the creek?" My soul said, "You're hearing every living creature, from the bacteria to the fish to the
Wow.
crawdads. You're hearing the family of the creek
Wow.
talk to each other and work together and create
Incredible.
together."
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. And so it wasn't like I was hearing people talking, but it was like if you went out to my goats,
Yeah.
sometimes they'll start talking to each other and they make sounds, and
Right.
like it's obvious they're talking. Like you can see dogs talking to each other or barking at each other across a valley. And I was so blown away by this. I must have stayed there for 3 or 4 hours because I just was fascinated by it. And so then I began to try to isolate voices. So if there was a fish swimming by and I could see it, I would listen and see is the sound moving with this fish, or
Wow.
and the loudest of them all and the most, which was kind of like, when it sounds like when a lot of crickets are chirping together. It was similar to that, not the same
A
sound,
symphony
like a
almost.
symphony. And I
Yeah.
said, "What is that?" To myself, "What is that I'm hearing the most? That sort of that sound of many beings talking." My soul said, "That's the bacteria."
Oh.
And I was like, "Wow, these guys are really active, man." They're like, it was like metaphorically, like being at Wall Street. There was so much activity in
Yeah.
there, and it was very lively. You could feel inside yourself and your soul that it was an energetic, like everyone was passionate about what they were doing. And I'm like, damn, this is like amazing music. And it was very healing to
Yeah.
my body. I found that it was laying next to the creek was actually affecting the flow of my blood through my body and my lymphatic system. I could feel everything, all my meridians were opening up and my energy was flowing. It's almost like I was getting an acupuncture treatment or shiatsu treatment done. You know how you can feel your energy flow start to balance out. And it was just fascinating. I've had many of those experiences, but it's exactly like you said, and people often say, well, how can you talk to a tree or whatever? I'm like, don't forget what they call junk DNA is actually the DNA record of everything that's ever lived on this planet. We're the tip of the evolutionary sword. So your unconscious mind already has the antenna system that connects to the soul group or frequency of that being. And so then your own unconscious communicates to your own ego. And if you ask, what is the tree saying? It can tell you because it's got tree genes in it. We got like 19% of the genes of a daffodil and 23% of the genes in a fruit fly. And I think we have 19% of the same genes as a banana. So people don't realize we've got the hardware to connect to everything.
Right. The software is just broken sometimes.
The software gets crap.
Software
up in
is
your
a bit
head.
buggy. Yeah.
The
It's
head.
like too many apps running, too many tabs open at the same time.
Yeah, and also the danger of belief, right? Beliefs tend to really create barriers to experience.
If you have listened to even one episode of Paul's podcast before, then you will know that he is passionate, and some would say even fanatical, about the quality of the food he eats and where it is sourced from. That is why the Chek household only eats pasture-raised meat, wild-caught fish, and organic produce. And that is why we subscribe to Wild Pasture's meat delivery service. Each month, Wild Pastures delivers a box of meat that has been raised by family farmers in the USA using regenerative farming practices. 100% grass-fed and finished beef, pasture-raised chicken, and pasture-raised pork, as well as wild-caught seafood. You can customize the selection in your box, add on extra when you know you will be feeding more people, or change your options each and every month. You might be thinking that this will be too expensive for you, but Wild Pasture's mission is to offer the highest quality meat at the lowest prices because they want to transform the meat industry. And that means that more people need to be able to choose meat that is raised right. Their pasture-raised animals are part of a natural ecosystem. Their farmers use rotational grazing, practices that mimic nature, and so do not need to use synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, hormones, or antibiotics. This beautiful process doesn't require the external resources, such as massive amounts of GMO grain, required with environmentally depleting conventional methods. And best of all, the meat and fish taste amazing. And for Paul's listeners, Wild Pastures are offering you 20% off your subscription for life, $15 off your first order, and free shipping. Seriously, you can't find a better deal for top quality pasture-raised meat. Go to wildpastures.com/Paul Chek. You don't need a promo code. Just visit wildpastures.com/Paul Chek and start choosing the goodies you will have delivered to you in your first box.
Look, while we have a few minutes left here, because we've been going for a while, you mentioned to me that you'd expanded the business a lot, and
Yes.
that teas is really not the main thrust anymore. I'd love to hear what you're up to and what are you offering now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we started off with the tea crystal. That's kind of, the product upon which we started the company. And the tea crystal is this, we take very, very high quality tea. And we have 2 biodynamic teas, by the way. I have to send them to you.
Great.
But, it's a very high quality plant material that's been extracted through this scientific process, cold extraction, which we, pioneered and is a patented proprietary process. And to create this very pure, distillate that is extremely authentic to what the original plant is. That's very important to me.
Hmm.
And so, it's got the full spectrum, active ingredients, but it also have all the compounds that haven't been identified as active ingredients because we've frankly identified very few. Um, and the important thing is that at the other end, in the crystalline form, it has to represent in color and in taste and aromatics. All of these things are actually, pieces of active ingredient in their flavor and their color. Like theaflavins are black.
Mm.
L-theanine tastes like umami. It's the creamy taste in matcha. Caffeine is bitter. The catechins are this tannic sort of substance. You can't not have any of those in a proper extraction process.
Right.
And so we really dialed that in. But the intersection of plants and science, which is really the representation of that, is kind of what our products are about in the
Right.
most authentic way, and using the highest quality ingredients. And so we've extended that to a liposomal vitamin C. And so there's also this concept of, a whole food and an isolate,
Yeah.
right? So my philosophy is very much based on you have a whole food, you have an isolate. The two things can actually be combined, and ultimately it leads to a much better level of absorption
Yeah.
and utilization of all the compounds therein. So for example, Nandika has the water extracts of reishi, it has the spore powder, but it also just has fruiting body ground up, right? So we've launched a liposomal vitamin C, obviously isolated calcium ascorbate form of vitamin C, much gentler on the stomach. Liposomal, very easy to absorb. It's,
Yeah.
Encapsulation is like, replicating the cell wall, right?
Yeah.
So it goes through the gut lining, gets absorbed by the cells. It tastes very bad. So we actually thought, how do we improve this product, right? And so we found elderberry concentrate, European black elderberry,
Elderberry is lovely.
and we synthesized the two things together, right?
Great.
And so it tastes amazing.
And they both support your immune system.
Exactly. It supports a singular benefit of immunity and skin too, but you have something that's completely, conducive to each other in benefit, but you have the thing that spikes in the macro dose of 1,000 milligram vitamin C, and then you have the elderberry that provides like a very full spectrum approach, and it tastes good, and it's like an amazing, and it looks delicious. That's kind of like a representative example of how we think about products. We developed an electrolyte that I told you about,
Mm-hmm.
and again, there, like, we use the highest quality mineral chelates, which are more bioavailable and absorbable. But we also put things like Himalayan pink salt. We only use mine salt, so there's no heavy metals. Coconut water, which is high in potassium.
Mm-hmm.
And then combine the isolates with these full spectrum foods, right? And so, those are some of the new products. Obviously, Nandika, about. But we also continue to launch teas. It's just become a much broader kind of portfolio, and how we think about, applying the philosophy that we have, with the intersection of nature and science, very powerful extracts. And then also, something I call Eastern medicinal architecture. It's, how do we make something that you can eat consistently? Now, a lot of plants, like, you're not meant to eat on the daily basis, right?
Mhm.
Some of them are just too powerful, or they become toxic to the liver over
Yeah.
continued, excessive dosage. And so, every single one of our formulations considers that according to the, Chinese materia, medica, it's like a compendium of Chinese herbs.
Right.
And it's like, reishi can be eaten every day. It's been done for thousands of years.
Yes.
Tea, people drink 10, 20 cups a day.
Mm.
Things like ginger, like turmeric, the spices, pepper,
Mhm.
which increases bioavailability of turmeric. So we think about all these things. Reishi cooling is actually quite cooling. So we put, chai spices in our Nandika to provide a warming counterbalance, right? So you can eat it every day. So that's kind of what I regard as like taking this Eastern approach to formulating things that are ultimately transformative, but also like very responsible in the sense that it's meant to provide this balancing.
Mhm.
And so just going back to the inner outer universe, we don't want to produce anything that based on the dosage will create an imbalance, right?
Right.
And so it's like, no matter what the season or the age, it's like this is something that can be received, and help with general balancing. So we're taking that approach, we're expanding it, and we've extended the product line with a great deal of success, such that some of our best selling products aren't teas anymore.
Yeah, and then so you had the cacao one. Was there other things? Because I thought you mentioned some other things to me. I can't remember what it was you were talking about.
We don't launch tons and tons of new products because we're super intentional. Every product I've gone to visit, like literally the farmers, and
Right.
looked at the land and
Very
smelled the
important.
soil and stuff, right?
Mm.
And so, we've launched Nandika, adaptogenic, kind of tea. We've done the liposomal C. That was after COVID, by the way. I was eating liposomal C every day. I couldn't stand
Mm.
the flavor of it, so we made our own. We did the electrolyte because I think electrolytes are essential. I'm sure you do too. Like
Yeah,
we're
it
we're
was.
we're missing a lot of minerals in our food.
We are. I sauna every day, so you have to use
Right.
electrolytes. If you sauna regularly, you'll create problems. I
Yeah.
hadn't been taking electrolytes for a while. I kind of just got out of the habit. But when we were
Mm.
skiing, I had a couple of times where my feet muscles started to cramp.
Uh,
Within minutes of drinking it, I feel like, wow, someone's turned the lights on here.
yeah.
And it's not like I'm walking around feeling tired or anything like there's something wrong with me. It's just, I'm sensitive to my whole body. And if you need electrolytes and you drink them, you feel it's enhancing everything in your body.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I feel a lot better now. My muscles,
Yeah.
sometimes don't realize the state you're in until you take something to balance yourself. And then you
Yes.
look back and go, wow, I really was walking around with a lot of tension in my body.
Right.
But now that I've been drinking 1 to 2 glasses of electrolytes a day for a couple of weeks now, it reminded me I better not forget to take those
Yeah.
things every day because I do a thorough sweat every day
Right.
because I love to vaporize. And if you vaporize regularly and you don't detox yourself, you get to the point where your armpits start to smell like tobacco. And
Oh wow.
you
Right.
remember when I had the spot on my
Yeah.
nose, that was too much oils because I put essential oils in there.
Right.
And all those things can, be work for the liver to clear out, even if they're
Yeah.
metaphorically good for you. You can
Yeah.
still get too much of anything good.
Right. Right.
And so Angie, who's a nutritionist, my wife Angie, she suggested years ago when I had that spot that I try liposomal glutathione, and within about a week and a half, it completely disappeared.
Right.
So I do a 1 capsule a day at night before bed of liposomal glutathione. I was doing more, but I found that it started making my skin get dry and itchy. And so I
Oh.
looked it up, and sure enough, that was one of the symptoms that you got too much.
Too much glutathione.
Too much glutathione is
Interesting.
dry, itchy skin.
Yeah.
So now I've just on a maintenance dose of 1.
Right.
But between the electrolytes and the sauna and the cold plunge, and then of course exercising and drinking enough water,
Yeah.
I can effectively counterbalance the
Right.
vaporizing and
Right.
still keep myself healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge fan of magnesium. I mean, you can literally feel, cognitive sharpness
Mhm.
immediately after.
I react strangely to magnesium. Bioptimizers makes a really beautiful magnesium with 7 different types. So you have
Right.
different, uh, what your body might need.
Mhm.
And it's supposed to help you sleep at night. And it does help a lot of people
Yeah.
Penny and Angie and even the kids all find great benefit to it, especially if the kids are wound up. Maybe they've
Right.
eaten too much dessert or watched a movie that's got them wound up. But when I take magnesium, it makes me wired. It's
Wow.
literally like I'm sped up.
Right.
And so I talked to Wade about it, and he said occasionally that happens. He says it's
Yeah.
rare, but every now and then you meet somebody like that. I've met many people. For example, my past assistant, if she would say, "Oh, this is a really good marijuana. It's very stimulating. It'll make your mind clear." So I might try it for some painting, and it would put me to sleep.
Yeah.
And then the ones that would put her to sleep would be stimulating to me. And I've found over the years probably a half a dozen people that, just like me, have the opposite effect to most people with various types of marijuana. So I think it just lends back to the fact that we are all very biochemically unique.
Totally.
You have to kind of test for yourself. So
Yeah.
the tip is don't buy 5 bottles of something before you've tried it, because you might
Yeah.
end up having to give it away.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a magnesium. I'll send to you.
Oh,
It
do
could
you?
be
I didn't know
interesting.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Simon and I are catching up here, obviously, after
half a
5
decade
years.
is a long time. I mean, gosh.
Yeah, it has
think
been a
about
long
that.
time. It's crazy too, because
Yeah.
it's like we moved in here. I think April. I think right right at the beginning of April 5 years ago. And it's just gone so fast. And we've been so busy. And, I've written over 3,000 pages of Spirit Gym book
Wow.
for 15. It's a 15 volume set. We're real close to publishing volume 1. We just got the PDF out, but we're having all my students give us feedback so that if there's typos and stuff, and feedback on how the layout is and the readability. So we're doing our last run through to get ready to make sure all the mistakes are out of it before we go to hard copy. And I'm publishing it really high quality paper and glossy and, like a coffee table type
Oh, wow.
book. I put tons of money into beautiful art.
It's a single book or it's multiple?
There's 15 volumes.
Wow.
So it's like a set. It'll be a set. And so it's over 3,000 pages, but to make it readable, we broke it into sections. And each book has the whole table of, the whole table of contents. So you can see all 15 volumes. And
Amazing.
that way you can say, oh, I like this or I like that. And you can get that book or you can buy the whole set.
Right.
Point being, I also built the Spirit Gym online training program, which is a mentorship program. So I was going day and night for the last 5 years, and plus managing the podcast and seeing clients and running workshops and dealing with the farm and the kids and the changes to the property. It seems like 5 minutes since you and I were doing our last podcast,
busy.
and it was 5 years.
I had a child in the meantime.
Oh,
she's 2 years old.
Wow, I didn't even realize that.
Actually, I moved back to Hong Kong for 2 years. Maybe that's when you were trying to contact me. I
think somebody told me that you had gone to Hong Kong, or maybe I reached out to someone at Pique Tea.
Yeah.
But it's been so long that I forgot the details.
Yeah.
But it's so great to connect with you again.
So nice.
And I just love your products, and I always have loved them, and I'm always excited to share them with people. One of my favorite things is finding really good stuff.
Yeah, I can tell. You have all the good stuff.
Come over here, try this Sheila J, try this vitamin C, try this smoke,
Right.
Because it's like, I'm a connoisseur like you are. We all like the best.
Yes.
And so when you can give somebody something that can really enhance your life, like when I realized what your teas could do to help me meditate, I was like, wow, that was a freaking great find,
Yeah.
That's changed my whole experience. So I just wanted to get you on again, remind people who makes the best teas in the world and other things that we've talked about. And also I love talking to you about all this stuff because we're both very passionate about, real spiritual growth and development and exploration and, kind of facing reality head on, not trying to hide from it,
Enzymes are one of the most important things we can use to supplement our diet. Very few people have normal levels of digestive enzymes. It's extremely common to be digestive enzyme deficient because so many people are eating cooked foods, processed foods, packaged foods, etc. The best digestive enzymes I've ever found are Masszymes by Bioptimizers. And one of the things I like about them is not only are they the most advanced technology for how they're produced, the science behind them, but I take them on an empty stomach every morning and every night as proteolytic enzymes to help clean my body. So I've got Wade here, who's the formulator of these enzymes, to tell us how do they work as digestive and proteolytic enzymes, because today I think we really need to be supplementing with high-quality enzymes. So Wade, what's unique about Masszymes?
Well, one of the interesting things is undigested protein is one of the biggest contaminants that cause problem for people, whether it's in their blood or inflammatory conditions, or even impairing recovery. And it's quite common amongst athletes who have high protein diets, interesting enough, who are looking to add recovery, but they're not breaking down their protein effectively. And that was my case way back in the day as a former bodybuilding champion. So we set about cultivating and developing an enzyme formulation that handled all of the amino acids in a pH range from 2 to 12, as well as providing an assortment of assistant enzymes. In other words, it doesn't just break down protein, it handles carbohydrates, it handles fats, it handles fibers, a variety of different things, and they work synergistically together to make sure that you can break down just about any food and digest it properly. Now, when you talk about the difference between enzymes, there's digestive enzymes and systemic enzymes. Systemic enzymes such as like nattokinase or serrapeptase. Well, they don't help break down digestion, but they can break down inflammation or inflammatory conditions, undigested proteins, or scarring tissue inside the body. Well, it turns out when you take masszymes on an empty stomach, it works exactly the same way. It will go into the bloodstream and now works as a systemic enzyme, reducing inflammation, accelerating recovery times. Matt just tore his Achilles tendon and made a full recovery after surgery within a few weeks, which they expected for many months. He was taking as many as 100 a day. Now, I'm not suggesting people do that, but this was an extreme condition. And the bottom line is masszymes is great for recovery, for cleaning up undigested proteins in the system, as well for digesting just about any meal. If this isn't the best digestive enzyme or systemic enzyme that you've ever taken, you get your money back. That's the Bioptimizer guarantee.
Spirit Gym with Paul Chek listeners can get 10% off their purchase of masszymes by going to bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and use the code PAUL10 at checkout. You can choose from 3 different sizes, and in addition, Bioptimizers always have special bonus gifts and additional savings when you get multiple bottles. So go to bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and use the code PAUL10 to check out masszymes with 10% off.
Yes. I mean, it's just every time I come here, there are so many moments that I remember for years after.
Great.
And it's a blessing, honestly. And that, the opportunity to talk about spirituality and the practice with somebody is also very rare for me, actually. So I just cherish this so much. You have
It's
no
hard
idea.
to find people that are committed. You'll get people that meditate once in a while, but I did Tai Chi every day, sometimes twice a day for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I just then felt that I needed to go explore because there was so many things I was studying. Like I've got a book of Steiner's techniques, which could take years to go through. I did a lot of things while I was doing Tai Chi. I did, I did Ra's in the Law of One, Book 4. Ra lays out the exact system because Ra is the entity, the beings that were once here and living amongst the Egyptians during the time the pyramids were built, but they developed the tarot to train Egyptian priests, and it actually shows the very ancient original Egyptian major arcana in the Law of One, Book 4, and they describe exactly how they trained the priests. And I thought, wow, I've got to do that. Mm-hmm. It took me 18 months of 1.5 to 3 hours of meditation a day to go through that system.
Yeah.
Because they don't want you to read about it. They want you to engage with the archetype and let it teach you what its function is. So they start off with 1. You meditate till the archetype tells you you're complete.
Yeah. And
so then you go to the next one through the 22. Then they give you pairings. Mm-hmm. So you then see how do these two interact together. And that takes a while because you got to go through all of them. Then you go to triplets. So it took me 18 months to actually do the training as Ra laid it out, but it was phenomenal. I mean, I had profound experiences in these meditations, and I wrote lots of diagrams and pictures and journaled the whole thing. I've got it all in my notebooks. And so my point is I was doing Tai Chi while I was doing that and various other techniques, but because I only had so many minutes in a day to devote to this stuff, I thought, okay, I've done 18 years of Tai Chi. I'm going to now open myself to just exploring what my soul wants me to practice and just be a little looser with it and kind of not have that military, gotta do it, stick to it.
Yeah.
Don't make excuses.
Yeah.
Come hell or, I mean, I used to do Tai Chi and anywhere. I would be doing Tai Chi in Montreal, Canada when it was, 8 degrees outside, freezing frickin' cold.
Yeah.
And I'd be doing it in bare feet or with wool socks on. And, I went all in,
Yeah, I mean, I used to stand up in the middle of an airplane to do standing
did
meditation.
many,
I'd be
many
the one
times.
go, why is this guy standing up the whole
I've done
flight?
a million times. I lived on airplanes for 25 years. So, Yeah, I mean, I was like committed. I'm like, I don't care if I'm I did it in airports. In fact, I almost
I
got
did in
arrested
airports,
once
yeah.
for doing Tai Chi. I've ever told you that?
No.
You wouldn't believe it. I had a 6 a.m. flight out of Carlsbad to LA. I think we were on our way to Sydney, Australia. And I had my Tai Chi ruler with me, and I went out in the parking lot. It's like 5 o'clock in the morning or something. And there's like nobody there. There's not hardly even any sunlight. And I'm over kind of on the side where there's the drive around where you drop people. But I walked all the way around to the other side, and there's just a cement wall there. And then on the other side is airplanes. And then maybe 400 meters or 500 meters away, there's another wall, and there's a suburb there. And the cop walks up to me and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing Tai Chi." He goes, "Well, you can't do that out here. You're going to scare people."
Oh,
I
that's
said,
crazy.
I
Yeah.
said, you're telling me that doing Tai Chi here when there's nobody here and the birds aren't even talking yet is going to scare somebody? And he said, "I don't think you should be doing that. If you keep doing that, I'm going to arrest you." And I said to him, "You used to be in the military, didn't you?" Because I could tell, once you're in the military, you know who's been in the military. He goes, "Yes." I said, "What's the first thing you did every morning in the military?" PT. I said, "So here I am out doing my physical training like anybody that wants to stay healthy would, and you're going to arrest me because I'm being a good example to the rest of the world?"
Yeah.
And he just turned around and walked away. And he said to me as he walked away, "If I see you doing it again, I'm going to arrest you."
So what did you do?
I finished my Tai Chi.
That's great. Were you bothered?
Was I bothered?
Yeah.
I was disappointed.
Right.
It made me sad. I'm
Right.
like, and plus the guy was quite overweight. I'm like, I don't know what year this was. It was probably 10 years ago, but I'm like, here we are in a modern age where we've got the most obesity,
Yeah.
the most sick people, the least physically fit people we have in the world. I mean, research by Michael Mogadun shows only 3% of women and 8% of men worldwide do any regularly scheduled exercise, including walking a dog.
That's crazy.
So here I am demonstrating discipline and commitment to my body and my health and my spiritual
Yeah.
development, and I'm being threatened to get put in fucking jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's what the world's come to. We got people that are security guards that think you're a threat because you're taking care of yourself in the parking lot. It's not like I'm running around with a skateboard banging off his shit or doing anything. I'm just
Totally.
standing in one spot with my eyes closed, breathing,
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's sad is that if you were doing push-ups or squats, he would be perfectly fine with it.
Exactly.
So he just couldn't handle seeing something so foreign, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, it's Tai Chi rule. It's just a little piece of wood in my
Yeah.
hand, and I'm breathing as I'm doing
Yeah.
circles with my body.
Yeah.
You know what it is, but I don't know. It made me sad. And I said to the guy, after I said, "You used to be in the military?" "Yes." And I said, "Well, what's the first thing you do in the morning?" I said, "I used to be in the 82nd Airborne Division. So I'm a real soldier. And I know the importance of taking care of yourself." And then
Right.
that's when he turned around and walked away. When I was a paratrooper, it was very common for paratroopers to ride all the non-paratroopers. And,
Yeah.
there's an elitism about being paratroopers, kind of like the first tier of elite soldiers. So
Yeah.
we kind of rub it into the noses of the other guys. So I said to him specifically, I was a paratrooper, to let him know I'm not just your average Joe, and I'm also a soldier. Like
Right.
I'm doing what a good soldier would do in or out of the military. Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what threatened him. I don't know.
Yeah. He definitely felt threatened. Maybe it was
Yeah.
something inside of him that, probably made him think that he should be doing something similar, but wasn't.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
He's
That's-
overweight, right?
that
Yeah.
probably made him feel bad about himself. But
Yeah.
the point is he should have been inspired.
Right.
But yeah, like you, I've done it in airplanes. I've done it in the waiting areas.
I do 8 brocades in the airport all the time.
Yeah. I got to tell you a funny story as we close out here, though. I was on a flight, an international flight, and it was late at night and everybody was sleeping, and I just could not get to sleep. And I was just uncomfortable sitting in the chair that long. And this is before I could afford to fly business class or first class. And so I got up in the aisle, and I don't know what time it was. It was sleep time for everybody. Everybody was asleep, and I'm doing Tai Chi, and I had this feeling I was being looked at, and I
Yeah.
had my eyes closed. I was doing the Tai Chi ruler. I knew if someone needed to get by, they'd tap me or something, but there was hardly anybody. Everyone was asleep, right? And I had this feeling I was being looked at, and so I looked to where I could feel the gaze coming from, and it was a little Chinese woman, probably about 70 years of age.
Yeah.
Real cute, beautiful little woman with curly hair and glasses. She looks at me and she winks. Like,
Wow.
good boy,
Nice.
right? And so then I thought, oh, that's nice. And so then I go back to doing my Tai Chi, and then a couple of minutes later, I feel someone next to me, and I thought, oh, maybe someone needs to get by. She got out of her seat, came and stood like 2 feet from me, facing me. And even though she didn't have a Tai Chi ruler, she
was doing it
pretended, and
too.
she
Oh
started
my
doing it
God.
with me.
That is so cool.
And I'm like, yay,
Yeah.
so cool.
yeah.
And so,
yeah.
I probably did 30 or 35 minutes or something like that. But I remember opening my eyes, and she was there, and she was giggling. She thought, this is the greatest. And she was probably with me for a good 10 minutes. And then she went and sat down.
Yeah.
Then later, when we were leaving to the baggage claim, I saw her, and she gave me the wink again, like we had a moment together.
Right,
It was just
right.
the coolest thing.
That's so funny. I have another plane story too. So I was doing sitting qigong, just meditating on the plane, and I had the most intense, like deepest, like whole body vibrating, like meditation. I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like I didn't expect to get this deep on this plane. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And I wasn't like, it wasn't at a time where I was like super dedicated because
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so when I was done, I was like, what the hell was that? And I looked back, and there were 3 nuns sitting in a row, and they were all meditating. And one of them looked like, she was like the chief, abbot of something. And I was like, oh, that's what it was.
You got in their field.
Yeah, I was like, holy smokes, that was like crazy.
They took you for a ride.
They took me for a ride. I was like riding on her coattail.
When, because back in the years, I haven't taught HLC, holistic lifestyle coaching, for a while because I got just so burned out of teaching the same things over and over again. And I had so many instructors trained, I didn't need to teach the lower classes. So I only teach the most advanced training
Right.
in the Chek Institute now. I teach HLC 3, which is the most advanced of that training. And I teach Integrated Movement Science 5, which is the final class for graduation from the academy, which is a 2-week deep exploration of the psyche and how to work with people's psyches and heal the shadow and all that kind of stuff. But there's been many times where I've had students that have taken HLC multiple times. And one of the things I teach is the Tai Chi ruler. But I've had several students come up to me over the years and say, I have a question for you. When I learned to do Tai Chi with you in class, I was doing it next to you, and I had profound experiences, but I can't get those experiences back.
Yeah.
And now I came for my second class, and I purposely stood next to you, and it happened again.
Yes.
And they said, how is that happening? I said, well, it takes a while to learn to let the mind go.
Yeah.
And I said, when I do this with you guys, I actually empty myself and create a stable field so that it's more likely that you will have an experience so that you
Right.
realize the potential of this.
Yes.
So there's an example of what probably happened with you and
Yeah.
the nuns, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah.
probably just created a very stable,
Right.
almost non-dual field for you.
Right. I've always wondered why the group meditations, especially led by a master, are so much more powerful.
That's
it's
it.
It's the collective field, right?
Yeah, they're creating,
Or is the master creating
the
it?
master's creating the coherence.
Right.
So
It can even be done on a Zoom.
oh yes,
remotely.
hell yeah,
Yeah.
because we're all connected.
Yeah.
At the non-local level, we're all connected immediately and instantaneously. You don't even need, light speed does not have any purchase power at the non-local field. You're instantly one with everything, and that's the truth of all of us all the time. It's just the physical body creates it's probably safe to call it a distortion.
Mhm.
And the distortion is that matter slows light down, and matter captures light. So whenever you have matter, you have a greater relationship that causes time. So
Mhm.
think of light. light on its own moves at the speed of light.
Right.
But light that's trapped in a stone is moving at just under the speed of light, but it's moving in a vortex, so it can't get away.
Right.
So if there was no matter, then there couldn't be any time because everything would be moving at the speed of light. So time would cease to exist. You'd be in the eternal now.
Right.
But once you have a material body, so when the soul, which is immaterial, comes into a material body,
Yeah.
it's like the non-local truth of us, oneness with God, is now like a light shining through the prism of the body, but it's creating entanglement.
Uh-huh.
So the flow of spirit is now stuck in a relationship with atoms,
Right.
and there's a rate of decay. Atoms have a rate of decay. The body has a rate of decay. So all your light now it's kind of like a capacitor.
Mm-hmm.
The way you make a capacitor is you use two different types of materials with different conductances, different levels of conductance. So, for example, if you put a hot, like gold, next to a semiconductor, and then put gold on the other side, the energy, the electricity will rush through the gold, hit the semiconductor, which will be like water hitting a stone in a river, causing it to almost vibrate. And then on the other side, you put gold and you got high conductance. So the pressure buildup from the slower conducting material actually can use to be raise voltage up. That's just a very simple example. So if you think of the soul like the gold and the body like the semiconductor,
Right.
then the soul comes into a field of time.
Right.
But if the soul was in its authentic state, it would be in a non-local state of the eternal now. So there
Right.
it would be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a section in Autobiography of a Yogi where Yogananda explains how yogis are able to move, travel vast distances, and it's through the control of their mass, right?
Yes, so that they're changing the vibration of the atoms in their body, just speeding
Okay.
it up till
That's
they
what
could
he meant.
levitate. Yeah, they're becoming less and less entangled. So some of the spiritual masters like Babaji's been cited at multiple places all over the world. Like I told you in the book series, Masters of the Far East by Spalding,
Because he explains how this works.
he doesn't explain how it works, but he cites many sightings of
Mhm.
masters because there was a team of scientists that went to Tibet and a couple of other locations, and they were logging everything they were doing. And then they would meet at the end of the day, and they kept getting shocks because one would say, I was with Master Kim show at 12 o'clock, and we were on this mountain. Another scientist would say, well, that's impossible because I was with him and I was 3 miles away from you.
Right.
And so the masters were doing this to them to show them beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was real. And there was many other things in the series that I'll let you read. It's quite profound. And they were sent there because the United States government and military had heard that masters could do things like walk through walls, and they thought it was a potential security threat. Because it's just like remote viewing. Once the United States learned Russia had a remote viewing program, they said, well, we better catch up because if they can spy on us like that, we need to know how they're doing it.
Yeah.
And so
What happened to that program?
remote viewing?
Well, yeah, the CIA had a program.
Well,
right?
it's still there. They just
They just don't
took
talk
it
about
underground so people don't keep looking around too much. But I mean, they wouldn't say it's still there, but you don't take something that powerful and just stop doing it. There's no way.
Yeah.
That would be like saying, oh, we just invented a quantum supercomputer, but it works so good, we're going to get rid of it.
We're going to stop
know.
investing. in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyhow, the point I was getting at is that these scientists were so detailed that they knew that there's no way that they would not acknowledge the fact that they have objective evidence that this is happening. So from my studies of this and studying Yogananda and many other of the mystics, what the way I would put it is that they've learned how to raise their vibration to such a high rate that they can actually just vibrate right out of the plane. And just by holding their intention on being somewhere else, they can be there, or they can put their body in, and they can also project themselves as a hologram. So it looks very real to you, but if you touched it, your hand would go right through it.
Right. Right.
There's a variety of things that most people don't really look into this,
Yeah.
but there's
That's how they're in the same, two places at the same time.
yes.
One's a hologram.
Yeah. And as you know, in Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda talks about the yogi who got his arm cut off and he put it back on and healed it.
Yeah.
And there's other things in there too. It's been years and years.
Well, ones that never eat ever.
Right.
For decades don't eat or drink anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's plenty of those. Well, in some of my books on Buddhism, they say that 160,000 Tibetans have achieved rainbow body. And when the monks or the practitioners achieve rainbow body, what happens is their body begins to smoke and it smolders and turns into ash. And every single case, when they go through the ashes, there's a beautiful gemstone that's left behind.
Yes. Yeah.
But what shocked me was that historically, they say there's 160,000 that have achieved rainbow body. And once they achieve rainbow body, they can materialize and manifest and do the kinds of things that a Yogananda could do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever heard the story, but when I was in summer camp with the monks, they told us, and Brother Triyananda was with Yogananda for many years. He was an old man at the time. He's long since died. I can't remember how many years ago he died, but he was 75, Brother Triyananda, when I was there. He was my favorite monk. He was an ex-Swiss soldier. Really cool guy, very powerful guy. Even as an old man, he could lift really heavy stones and crazy stuff. I used to go up into the windmill. He lived in the top of the windmill at the lake shrine.
No kidding.
And he had a whole weightlifting set up there.
No kidding. Wow.
I would go up there and lift weights with this guy.
Cool.
It was really cool. But him and a couple of the other monks were telling us that one time a famous Olympic sprinter came to Yogananda who was in LA or lived in LA, but he was skeptical. But he came to see Yogananda at the in the Encinitas temple where he wrote the Autobiography of a Yogi, right in Encinitas, down right close to us now. And he said to Yogananda, he said, I hear all these things about that you can do and that you're a true master. And he says, I'm just apprehensive and it's hard for me to believe some of the things that people say that you can do. And so Yogananda said, well, if you're interested in my teachings, why don't you join the fellowship and learn? And the guy said, well, I have to be convinced that you're a true master because people say this kind of stuff about people all the time. And Yogananda was only like 5'1" or 5'2". He was a short little guy. And Yogananda says, well, you're a sprinter. How about if I take you to the beach down there? He says, and he looked out and there's a big rock sticking out of the ground because the tide was out. And then there was another big rock, probably 40 or 50 meters away. Yogananda says, how about if we race from that rock to that rock and back? And Yogananda says, if I can beat you to that rock and back, would you become my student? And the guy laughed at him. He said, I'm a world-class sprinter, right? Yogananda said, yes, that's the point. So the monks said, they got down. One of the monks said, ready, set, go. And the guy was down in a 3-point, like a sprint start. And before he took 3 steps, Yogananda was already heading back.
Wow.
And the guy just stopped and he was in complete shock. And then
Yeah.
he became a student of Yogananda's.
Yeah.
Now,
Amazing.
people have a hard time believing stuff like that, but when you're around these people
Yeah. You
who've
can't not believe.
spent 30 plus years in
Right.
devotion and meditation and, initiation, you start realizing there's more going on than a lot of people can realize.
Yeah.
Whether you're a fitness professional, healthcare specialist, or just a regular human being, I'm sure you've seen this. Someone who seems to be training hard and eating right, and yet they still can't shift those excess pounds, build muscle, or make progress on their health goals. It's like they're trapped in a hamster's wheel, running on the spot and getting nowhere, stuck in their stress, pain, and bewilderment about why they're not getting the results they think they should. The problem? Most people are only considering 1 or 2 aspects of health and wellness, and yet the human body is a complex system of systems. That's why the Chek Institute created the Chek Academy, a complete education in holistic health, exercise, and lifestyle coaching. If you're ready to make the leap into a new career, Or perhaps seeking more advanced skills to enhance your current work, the Chek Academy is the path. In year 1, you'll go deep into holistic lifestyle coaching level 1, integrated movement science level 1, our new scientific core conditioning course, and much more, learning how to really help yourself and others thrive. You can study from your own home or join the Chek faculty at locations around the world for a combination of online and in-person courses. Enrollment is open now, but spaces are limited and the spots do fill up quickly. Head to chek.group/Chek Academy and submit your application before September the 30th. That's chek.group/CHEK Academy.
I have to tell you one last story.
Sure.
So my wife and I, we've been looking for a house in LA for forever, basically 8+ years.
Yeah.
It's impossible to find a place there. And over time, the our business has grown, and the things that you want in a house also changes, right?
Yes.
And obviously, like, I'm a meditation guy, so like I wanted a sanctuary, like I wanted it to be in nature, but not too far from the city. And I'm a feng shui guy, so I wanted to south facing. I wanted to look at the ocean, mountain in the back. I wanted it to have a good number. All of these things, right? And I'm not like,
There's your 8 years.
yeah, I'm exactly. There's my 8 years.
Took us 5 years to find this
Right,
place.
exactly. And I'm not crazy, right? Like I
No.
don't insist on these things, but
Those are the
they're
dream.
mine. It's part of the dream.
Yeah.
And so, last year in January, we were living in Hong Kong at the time, and I came back for a trip, and I was sitting at the lake shrine meditating, and I said, Guruji, am I gonna find a house on this trip? And I had booked a bunch of viewings, and there were 100 viewings so far, and the answer was like yes, and my whole body was like electrocuted, and I was
Wow.
like, wow, I guess I am gonna find a house. And the next day I went to see a place which I almost wasn't going to go to, but none of the houses I looked at were satisfactory. And my wife said, just go look at that place. You had an intuition. Everything was around the lake shrine, by the way, 'cause that's where I wanted to be. And I walked in. It had the perfect number according to Chinese numerology. It was a perfect sanctuary. It looked at the ocean. There was a mountain in the back. It was completely secluded. And we ended up buying the house and living in there. And we were in Hong Kong again in December. We came back in January. The day that we arrived on the plane, the plane had landed. My wife looked at her phone. She's like, "There's a fire in the Palisades." And, there are fires all the time. And I said, "Is it serious?" She's like, "I think it's very serious." And, I called, one of our neighbors, and to complete panic. They're like, "There's a fire coming down the side of your mountain." I was like, "What do you mean the side of my mountain? It's like, it's like literally 6 feet from your car." And I was
Wow.
like, inside, I was like, holy shit. And so I pulled open the camera. We have these cameras outside, and the palm tree that was literally like, it's like 5 feet from my house was completely ablaze, right?
Wow.
And the plane, we hadn't even unbuckled our seatbelts yet. I looked to my wife. I was like, "Honey, we have to pray, because
You're going to
our
lose
house
your
is,
house.
is going to be gone if we don't." And we had like a minute to say a prayer. And of course, like I prayed to the lineage from the lake shrine. And I only had a second because we had to get up and take our bags out. And after I took the bags out, I looked at the camera again, and the palm tree was dripping with water.
That's crazy.
It was dripping with water, Paul. And then we got off the plane, and I
There
was
was
like,
no fireman doing it?
I couldn't see that much. It was like,
yeah.
just looking at the palm tree. And then the next time I checked out of the plane, the cameras were out. And, because the prayer was so quick, we were taking the elevator down. We go everywhere with our dogs, so we're taking the elevator down. And, I did a proper prayer, and I could see, Babaji, Lahiri Mahashrai, Sri Yukteswar, Paramahansa, in a kind of like a rainbow over the house, and there was this halo protecting it.
Wild.
And inside, I knew that it would be fine. And even though I couldn't see it for another week, because it was total chaos, I knew it would be fine. And so finally, I got a chance to go up to see the house. Waited in line for like 8 hours in my car. I took a buddy in whose house burned down in the Palisades, who his neighbor confirmed, and we were driving up. And there was another guy in the car, because I was like first in line, so I brought some people with me. And we were driving up the hill, and everything was burned, everything was brown. and my house was green.
Wow.
And inside, I felt, I was like, holy shit, it's green. And I didn't want to say it out loud
You mean
because
the grass and everything?
everything, the trees,
All of it.
everything was green. And I didn't want to say anything because my buddy had, three of his relatives lived there, including himself, all burnt down.
Wow.
And he saw it and he's like, holy shit, it's green. And I was like, yeah, it's a freaking miracle.
It is a miracle.
And the police that brought us up, he got out of the car. He's like, I can't believe this. And we were both like, it's a miracle. And that's the story of our home in the Palisades,
Well, the moral of that story is prayer with heartfelt intention really does work. And I have been wanting to do a podcast on prayer because I have a lot of experience with prayer and have studied lots of research on prayer. And I think prayer really shows the power of our connection to everything and to all the higher dimensional beings. I mean, when our intention is love, the whole universe, I believe, conspires to support us.
100%.
And I think prayer is a great way to give gratitude and to connect to souls. The beautiful thing about prayer is whether the person you're praying for knows you're doing it or not, it's effective. And you'd be surprised how much research, good, solid scientific research there is. I've got multiple books, but one book, which I believe is by Larry Dossey, which is all research on prayer. And it's crazy how powerful prayer is. And you're proof of it. And your house is proof of it. Amazing. What a phenomenal dialogue, man.
That was
Let's
so
not
great,
wait
Paul.
5 more years.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, well,
I gotta
beautiful.
come and hang out more.
Yes, thank you. I'd look forward to that, and I'll make sure I'm stocked up with all the goodies for you.
Thank you so much, Paul.
And thanks to all of you guys. I hope you enjoyed the journey with me and Simon. This is what it sounds like when I hang out with my friends and rap. And thank you to our sponsors for all your love and support and all the beauty you pour into the world by supporting organic, biodynamic, and free-range farmers. Thanks to each of you for taking good care of yourself. If you buy from the sponsors, you're taking care of yourself. You're taking care of the people that support the earth. You're taking care of me so I can run the podcast. That's a lot of love. Look forward to bringing back a next podcast with something exciting and interesting. And make sure you check out Pique Teas. They got a lot of great stuff. You just got to hear directly from the man that creates it all. So have lots of love and good time until I see you again. And hopefully you can put some of the tips we gave you to work today, like just do what feels good as a spiritual practice, but devote some time to it and put your heart into it, and magic can happen. So talk to you next time. Thanks again, Simon. Aho.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek and today's guest, Simon Cheng. If you haven't tried Pique's teas and elixirs, now is your chance. Paul's listeners can get up to 20% off for life and a free starter kit when you try a subscription for one or more of Pique's amazing beverages. Go to piquelife.com/Paul Chek and explore all the options, including Nandaka, their adaptogenic coffee alternative, Sun Goddess Matcha green tea, or Daily Radiance elderberry liposomal vitamin C. For more interaction with Paul and to share ideas and ask questions about topics discussed in this podcast, we invite you to join his Spirit Gym program and community. There are 3 different levels of membership to fit your budget and lifestyle, where you can participate in live Q&A sessions with podcast guests, access the members forum within the Spirit Gym community, where you can chat with other members, attend weekly virtual meetups with Paul, and study the comprehensive Master Key online program. Explore the options and subscribe today by going to myspiritgym.com. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.